Welcome to Meditation Mount and to this broadcast of View from the Mount. So let's begin by taking time to connect with everyone. We're gathered in our various parts of the world. So let's begin by bringing ourselves to a point of stillness. And we do this through the breath. As we take a series of deep, gentle breaths, we release any tension that may be held inside our physical body. Allow it to relax. And we breathe out any tension that may be held inside our emotions. We release these and breathe in a sense of calmness. And we breathe out any extraneous thoughts that may be swirling inside our mind. Let them dissolve. Allow the mind to become free and clear and open. And now let us step into the silence of the heart together, becoming aware of the beating of our own heart. And as we visualize our many from around the world gathered at this time, we listen with the inner ear to the beating of all of our hearts. And slowly our many hearts synchronize and beat as one group heart. And it is this group heart that will hold us in love, in clarity, in wisdom, as we begin our journey today. Thank you. Our theme today is the call of freedom. It's a very timely topic. So why are freedom and the right to self-determination such vital factors in the successful evolution of human consciousness? Why is the call of freedom resounding so strongly within human hearts all across the world during these turbulent times of transition? These are the big questions facing us. And during our time together, we will explore the deeper dimensions underlying the importance of freedom of choice and the power of free will from a spiritual, psychological, and social perspective to help make better sense of what's taking place in our world. But let me begin with a bold statement, and I say this from my heart. Without freedom to choose our own personal path through life, we cannot learn the needed lessons of wielding power and assuming responsibility for our actions through a lived experience inside the classroom of daily existence. Without freedom, we cannot give birth to our own homegrown wisdom. And I would dare to say that freedom and the sovereignty of self are inalienable rights that lead us steadfastly onward upon the way of self-discovery, and they ensure an eventual state of self-realization. So freedom is at the heart of everything. It goes deep. It's at the heart of our solar system, not just the heart of our humanity. And I'd like to draw upon some of the ageless wisdom teachings and share with you and explore with you to gain insight into why the law of freedom governs the process of evolution in our solar system, and why freedom of choice and self-determination are requisites for consciousness to evolve from the inside out. I probably should put out a disclaimer. What I'm sharing with you is what registers as true for me. I'm not saying it is the truth. What I've drawn from the Ageless Wisdom teachings resonates with me. I have had some experience of it to some degree, and therefore I'm not asking you to believe in anything. I'm offering a way of a map, and we can journey into this territory together. But the map is not the territory. We have to live it ourselves. We have to go on the journey of self-discovery. That is the whole point of freedom. So why don't we begin our journey with the words of a contemporary philosopher and modern-day mystic, Dr. Seuss. So here are the words of Dr. Seuss. You have brains in your head. You have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose. You're on your own, and you know what you know, and you are the one who'll decide where to go. Thank you, Dr. Seuss. I think it's a really great way of starting off, because this can be a fairly heavy-duty subject, and we have to hold it lightly because it has such gravitas to it, the call of freedom. So the normal trajectory of spiritual inquiry is to move from the universal to the particular. So I'd like us to start with the big picture. And the story of creation and the evolution of consciousness has been recorded in many volumes of esoteric writings, such as the ancient Vedic texts. And back at the end of the 19th century, Madame Blavatsky wrote The Secret Doctrine. So as a starting point for this big picture, please allow me to encapsulate and condense this vast historical panorama into one page of writing. And I call it The Dance of the One and the Many. And so I invite you, if you're sitting comfortably and ready, I will tell a story. It's our story. And you may want to listen to this with your eyes closed, half closed, or open. But let me read you a story that is who we are. It is our story. Before creation, silence and the stillness of a focus point. The One slumbered through the cosmic night in a state of unknowing and dreamlike amorphous unity. The I Am sensed but did not know itself. And with the dawn of a new cosmic day, it stirred and stretched and dreamily imagined infinite possibilities as the desire to be burned deep within its heart. Then, through an act of will, the One fractured itself into 1 billion pieces and chose to send them on their way into the fields of time and space as pilgrims on a journey of self-discovery and realization. Having pervaded the universe with a fragment of myself, I remain. Over time, these separated parts awoke. They looked around, beheld others, never realizing the true nature of this other. Inside the encapsulation of the separated self, each aspect experienced the power of the isolated I. And through a series of relationships with that which lay outside the universe of self, an identity of a me and a you was perceived and registered. And so with faltering steps, the I am that made its painful and persistent progress along the thorny path. The long journey of ceaseless striving for humanity as the prodigal son and the prodigal daughter had now begun in earnest. Finally, deep within the heart of the separated self, a cry for wholeness welled up and issued forth. Slowly the parts began to see themselves in each other, until one day an understanding dawned within the consciousness of the fractured body of humanity that there is no other. There is only the one soul. Imagine the euphoria of this spiritual homecoming coursing through the group field as the soul whispers in our inner ear. There is no inside or outside, no me or you, no above or below for the mind to grasp. There is only a sublime state of at-oneness, suffused with joy and permeated with a profound and fiery love that knows no bounds. And so the mystery of being registers and awakens in the human heart through a deep co-resonant communion with that all-pervading fiery presence we call a greater love, the heart of hearts. This incandescent fire of love dwells within each human heart as the seed and the promise of our true, unbounded self. Then, finally, when the day has come, the I am that I am will emerge as the one who knows itself as one with itself, a result of all the probations, trials, and weary steps taken throughout the ages upon the long and thorny path of self-realization. Lives within lives, wheels within wheels, all in constant communication, coherence, and co-creative communion. Everything is a sacred fractal of the one life. Everything is essentially divine. So I apologize if that was the too short a version. That was my rendition of this evolution of consciousness so far and where we're headed. What I'd like to do, though, is to actually illustrate that. I'd like to show a slide and unpack this story, because it really is the story of how the one life chose to enter time and space. So I've called this next slide the three births. And we'll spend a little time looking at this. It's as though we are part of a great cosmic experiment to see if the fragmented one life can, by its own volition, choose to make its way back to a greater state of wholeness that is its origin. So it's moving from this unmanifest state into a state of individualization, separation, and then returning back consciously to wholeness. So moving from serving a personal will as humans to choosing then to serve the greater will of the Creator of whom we are a part. So this is the illustration of the story I've just narrated. In the beginning was the I am, this state of unknowing. And the choice was to fracture this amorphous unity into a billion pieces, send it out into time and space as pilgrims. And then here we are at the bottom of the picture here, the I am that, the human experience. Having pervaded the universe with a fragment of myself, I remain, says the Bhagavad Gita. So in each one of us, God lives, the Creator lives. But we don't know that, we haven't realized that. And therefore that sleep of forgetfulness is a painful sleep. It's a sleep of separation. And so what we are faced at the moment is, how do we respond to the inner call of life to come back into a conscious state of wholeness. So the I am that moves into the I am that I am. And the third birth is a consciously remembered and embodied state of oneness. Birth one was this amorphous sense of unity. Birth two is the birth of the individuated self, the separated self. And this is where we can get stuck in time and space in the separated self. And when we get stuck in separation, we see all sorts of painful things happening in our world. So I wanted to show this just as a way of illustrating the journey we're on. And I also want to bring in here the principles and pathways that we hold dear at Meditation Mount as the foundation of a new society, and relate them to this journey and relate them to the call of freedom. As you know, we have three principles at Meditation Mount. Essential divinity, that says inside of each one of us, a spark of the Creator lives. Well, that's what we've just described. Having pervaded the universe with a fragment of myself, I remain. Essential divinity. God lives in all things, and we live in God, or we live in the Creator, whatever name you wish to give to it. The second principle that we work with at Meditation Mount is the principle of goodwill, which is that of love, where love is the lifeblood and the true currency of all relationships. And it's love that sent forth the fractured body of the one on this journey of self-discovery. It's love that propelled and compelled the whole of creation. It's a pre-existing state, love. And the third principle that we work with is that of unanimity, which basically says we're part of one interdependent whole, one seamless web of life. And when we complete our journey and become realized, self-realized, the self that we realize is the original self of oneness. And so unanimity, goodwill, and essential divinity are the three principles. And each of them has a pathway that leads into that. And this is where choice comes and the freedom to choose. So the freedom to choose to explore our essential divinity is called the pathway of spiritual approach. There doesn't have to be a religious approach. It could be spiritual, religious, musical, artistic, scientific. It's whatever brings us closer to knowing who we are. And the pathway that leads us into goodwill and that field of love that pervades everything is called the pathway of right human relations. So we choose to be in right relationship with ourselves, with others, and with all of life. And then the pathway that leads to the experience of unanimity is called the pathway of group endeavor. Now that's a choice. Do I just live as an isolated person, or do I become part of a community? Do I become part of a group? Because a community and a group really is the one life calling itself back together. So we say that group endeavor allows you to live into an experience and an embodiment eventually of the principle of unanimity. So I just wanted to name those because freedom to choose. So nobody is forcing us to do anything. We are compelled by the power of life itself to come back into wholeness. But apparently we're given free will, and it's up to us to discover when and how and where we make these choices. So I just wanted to present this to show how this works. So what you could say is that as fractals of this one life, we're the microcosm of the macrocosm, we're learning the lessons of being a conscious and wise God. So what we're going to look at now is What does it mean to learn to be a God? So let's leave this particular image and, as we said, universal to the particular. So let's bring ourselves more into focus. So we're learning the principles of being a creator inside the classroom we call the universe of self. So this universe of self, this lifetime is called Michael, and yours is called whatever your name is. So what are the basic lessons of being a wise God and a wise steward of our own universe? What are the choices in front of us? So there are two main pillars to the temple of divinity, and I'd like to show them. They're called creativity and responsibility. The power to create. This is what it means to be a creator, to call forth new life into form, to call forth, to manifest, to create. But if we just create and don't take responsibility for our actions, then we end up with a mess. It's like the sorcerer's apprentice. You've heard that story of this sorcerer's apprentice who listened at the keyhole basically and heard how to start the cauldron that produced all this porridge. And so he learned the way of starting it, but he didn't learn how to stop it. So the whole place flooded with oatmeal, with porridge. So the lesson is the power to create is coupled with the power to assume responsibility for our creations. So this is what we find ourselves in at the moment. We're learning what it means to make choices, to choose to put our power somewhere. Remember, energy follows thought. So whatever we think and act upon, that is a creative act. And very often, when we create something and don't like it, we walk away from it and we leave it. And we don't always take responsibility. So this is really learning creativity and responsibility. And so let's look at the next image. It's all about choice. So it says creativity and responsibility must go hand in hand. And we're talking about whether you're the creator of your own individual self, or this is the creator of a solar system. The creator is responsible for the well-being of the whole, and also to ensure that that whole is resonating and part of a greater whole. So here we see the classical thing. I know I've done it. I'm sure you've done it. Sweep things under the carpet. Whoops, nobody's looking. Sweep it under the carpet. And then the lump starts to grow under the carpet and we trip over it. Nothing can be swept under the carpet. You cannot disown yourself, because everything that we create has our own stamp of identity on it, our own hallmark. So at some point, we have to face reality and face the test and say, I accept full responsibility for all my actions. I am the creator. Now, this is interesting because now we're looking at the law of karma. And I'd like to present the law of karma in a slightly different way. First of all, by saying the law of karma is not a law of punishment. It's an educational approach. So here I've said you cannot leave litter. There is a cosmic anti-litter law, which means you can't leave pieces of yourself strewn about. Whatever you create, you have to pick up, take responsibility for, and recycle it. Put it to use or recycle it. No personal litter. Offenders will be reincarnated. Now, that's not a threat or a punishment. That's just life saying, look, we love you, and we're going to give you another opportunity to get it. And until you get it, you're free to come back to this classroom. And how you graduate from this classroom is by understanding that I am responsible for my creation. That's how you graduate. So I would say that karma is this gift of grace that says, until you learn the lessons, we will provide the classroom. I think it's a magnificent law. I don't see it as punishment. it really is a guarantee that we won't get stuck. We may get temporarily stuck, but there is a way out. So karma is an educational process that shows us the consequences of our actions so that we can make different and wiser choices the next time. As I said, karma guarantees that we will eventually learn the lesson of wholeness and what it means to be a responsible fractal of the one life. And I would say that without karma and the gift of grace, there would be no learning. And without learning, there would be no awareness. And without awareness, there would be no self-generated wisdom to guide us. All of this depends on our ability to choose freely. So what is the challenge of free will, of choice? So let's look at this next image. This is about the freedom to choose. Now, we have the freedom to choose. This was a situation I found myself in. I'm sure many of you find yourself in. You come to a fork in the road. And I mean, do I go this way? Do I go that way? If I go this way, what would my life be? And we freeze. We don't know what to do. And the map doesn't say this way, that way. It basically says you are here, now make a choice. What I'd like to put forward, that free will doesn't alter our identity, our essential divinity. Free will is how we choose to express ourselves in time and space. But at the time, it's like, oh my gosh, if I do this, I'll be somebody else. No, you'll just be a different form of who you are. And I'm reminded, for those of you living in the United States, we know the great baseball pundit Yogi Berra, and his famous phrase, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. So I think enough said about free will and choices there. But that's what we often encounter, is we're learning the lessons of free will. Because without that, life would be telling us what to do. Now, life is telling us what to do through our own soul, but our soul can only tell us and guide us when we're in touch with it. And it can only be in touch with us and we in touch with it when the field is clear of all the distortion, all the noise, and all the let's call it the cacophony of daily life. So there comes a time when we begin to hear the call of the soul, the cry for wholeness. So let's have a look at this cry for wholeness. So this cry for wholeness comes from a deep, deep place within ourselves. And you'll see outside of the house, outside of our home, all these elements, all these shapes, and inside of them, they have the same, if you like, red star that's at the heart of this person. So these are all the things that we've created in our lives and abandoned, disowned, turned our backs on, forgotten, been unaware of. So what happens when we utter a cry of wholeness, when we choose to be whole, when I make the declaration, I choose to be whole, all these parts get the message, oh my gosh, we're going home. And so there is a great movement. And in the work that I've done in coaching and consulting and therapy, there is a big difference between somebody who's having a hard time as a result of saying yes to life and somebody who's having a hard time as a result of saying no to life. So a lot of the challenges that many of us are facing, our lives are falling apart, our lives are doing this, doing that. It's a result of us saying yes. It's a result of us responding to this cry for wholeness. So how do we respond to this cry? Let's have a look at another image. Often we choose comfort. No, I'm not saying comfort's bad. I'm saying every now and again, it's nice just to sit down, have a cup of tea, have a cup of coffee, whatever it is, and take a rest. But when that becomes your preferred state, then that temporary rest period on the journey becomes a refuge from change. It becomes our happy bubble that we hope will shield us from all the unpleasant things in life. And often those unpleasant things are the unredeemed aspects of ourselves. And they begin to knock on the door. Why? Because we've called them home. And go away, you're disturbing my peace. We don't want to open the door because, I'm comfortable. As Pink Floyd wrote, comfortably numb. So a lot of people are walking around uncomfortably numb or comfortably numb. But the point here is at some point we have to choose whether to open the door or not. And when we choose to open the door, this is what we might find. Oh my God. Who's this? Who are you? Who's this stranger? Who's this beast on my threshold? My God, who are you? And the reply comes, I am the unloved and unaccepted parts of you. Let me in. I'm cold and lonely out here. So the choice is, do I let in this stranger? Do I recognize this other as myself? Do I recognize the darkness as the unredeemed aspects of myself, that inside of this shadow is the light of my own being? That's a choice point. The choice point to heal, to become whole, is the choice to face our shadow. So we do that at an individual level, but I also want to put forward that this is exactly what we're doing at a global level. There is a world shadow that we are facing together. The world is now passing through its own shadow because there is a deep cry for wholeness. Even though we are captured by the materialistic forces, we sense a deep cry of the soul inside us to return home. And we've called forth our own shadow. If you don't call it forth, you can't meet it. And if you don't meet it, you can't embrace it. If you don't embrace it, you can't redeem it. And if you don't redeem it, it will persist as a dark, negative influence. So this is what we're facing, I believe, as a world community. This is our choice point. And I don't need to say much more. As you look around the world now, you'll see our own shadow knocking on our door, still very active. And do we have the courage to redeem it? Do we have the courage to face up to what it means to be responsible for our creations? So I just wanted to offer that as something to ponder on. So we've looked at freedom from the big picture, the big cosmic picture. We've looked a little bit now at freedom from the more the psychological of how do we deal with the unredeemed aspects of ourselves. And I'm not going in depth. I just want to name these so that we know the territory. I said we were going to look at the aspect of society. I want to look at that through the political lens, but I also want to define what I understand as politics. Politics at the highest level is the collective process of choosing how we wish to live together and govern ourselves. So politics is the collective process of choosing how we wish to live together and govern ourselves. So the question in front of us is, what does it mean and what does it take to live in a free society? That's what we're wrestling with at the moment. So I'd like to go back 75, 80 years to one of the leading lights that came out of America, the United States of America, Franklin D. Roosevelt. And FDR put forward the 4 freedoms. So let's examine this powerful vision of freedom that FDR held. He held it as the foundation for a more just and healthy society. So just let me read what he wrote. In the future days, which we seek to make secure, we look forward to a world founded upon 4 essential human freedoms. The first is freedom of speech and expression. everywhere in the world. The second is freedom of every person to worship God in his or her own way everywhere in the world. The third is freedom from want, which translated into world terms means economic understandings which will secure to every nation a healthy, peacetime life for its inhabitants everywhere in the world. The fourth is freedom from fear, which translated into world terms means a worldwide reduction of armaments to such a point and in such a thorough fashion that no nation will be in a position to commit an act of physical aggression against any neighbor anywhere in the world. Now, that was a powerful offering from FDR. And that really is a sound foundation for a new society. In the same way at Meditation Mount, we believe that these three principles of essential divinity, goodwill, and unanimity are foundational if we're to build a more just and joyful and healthy society. So if politics is how we choose to live together, then our society is organized through choice. And I believe we realize that sometimes it's a few people choosing how the rest should live. And at the moment, the world is engaged in a very deep conversation about democracy. What does democracy mean? Is it one person, one vote? Is it the right to free speech, the right to free assembly? What happens if we're not given that? Do we claim it? Is it okay to revolt, to rebel? What does it mean to respond to the call of freedom? And that is exactly the story that's being played out now. I can sense it. I can feel it in my heart. I see it on the news. I feel it in my body. This is what we are exploring together. How do we choose to live together? First of all, as human beings, and then we as human beings have to figure out how do we choose to live together in harmony with the rest of life on this planet, both visible and invisible. So is this really possible in our lifetime, democracy? As I say, democracy, I believe, is a work in progress. And it depends on our ability to access freedom of choice and self-determination. Now, there's a downside, a temporary downside to free will. That means if Michael decides, yeah, I can do anything I want, which is true in the short term, but I can wreak havoc in my life and other people's lives. I can create, bad things. But there comes a time when I wake up to the fact, oh my gosh, I'm harming somebody else, I'm harming myself. And with that realization, I change. But before that realization happens, we're locked into this pattern where free will is normally the power to exert our will over others. So free will and the freedom of choice is usually, I have the freedom to take what I want, I have the freedom to tell you what I think, until it really moves into a more mature state, which is, I have the freedom to be of service to you, to be of service to life. So we could say that when the good of the whole is not the primary organizing principle, then the few tend to use the resources of the whole to their personal advantage and gain. And that's what we have at the moment. Without blame or judgment, that's where we are as a human society. So when freedom of choice and the right of self-determination are absent, then we have the rise of totalitarianism and dictatorship. We've seen it. We've seen it in the past. We see it in the present. And we can see specters of it on the horizon. So what we do through our choices, we've created, if you like, a prison. So unintentionally, we have imprisoned ourselves in physical, emotional, and mental dependencies. So we're incarcerated in the results of our own choices because they aren't necessarily the wisest choices. They're not wise choices because we haven't learned what wisdom is. And we can only learn what wisdom is when we exert free will and we understand the consequences of acting out our free will. So in the ageless wisdom teaching, the task of liberation is referred to as freeing the prisoners of the planet, freeing ourselves from the material and emotional addictions and the fixed beliefs that keep us, as the Buddhists would say, chained to the wheel of rebirth. So we're witnessing war on many fronts. And the battlefield includes competing ideologies. And these show up as our choices that we make around our different religious, political, and social beliefs. Each one of them has their preferred meme or deeply imprinted pattern in the psyche. And so we duke it out. There's a battle between beliefs, where in fact, free will is intended to bring us home. But at the moment, we're fighting with each other and not aware that we're on the way home. We're moving back towards a state of oneness, of wholeness. So democracy or communism or whatever other form of social order we may think of will never serve the deep desire of the one soul of humanity until the good of the whole prevails as the primary and shared intent. That's something I sense very strongly. So let's take a deep breath. This is what's happening at the moment in the world. And we're familiar with special interest groups who lobby for their needs over the good of the whole. And if you're in the special interest group, of course, you believe that your interest needs to be heard and needs to be funded, etc. But when it is competing with others for resources, it's part of a downward spiral. So there are lobbyists, we know that. But I'd like to put forward the notion the soul is the silent lobbyist, overlighting our lives, seeking to influence our choices without imposing its will. It does it by patiently witnessing and watching with love. So the soul lobbies on behalf of the whole system, inviting us to choose and support its special interest. And the soul's special interest is the common good and the general welfare. So let's begin to sum up what we've been exploring here. I need to take a breath. I think we've been really moving through this. This is dense matter. This is a dense subject, and yet we need to hold it lightly and be able to breathe through it, breathe with it. I would say that self-realization is an intimate inner process of coming into resonance with the one life. Self-realization happens when we give birth to a new awareness that is embodied. We give birth to our own awareness. It's an aha moment. Nobody else can give us self-realization. The aha moment is when something is born inside of us as a result of our own experiences, our own choices. So I give birth to my own. I'm not adopting somebody else's children, somebody else's beliefs. And self-realization, therefore, can only occur inside a field of unconditional freedom. So this home birth of wisdom requires the midwife of freedom. So we're learning to stand in our own spiritual sovereignty, to make daily choices that support a greater purpose and serve all beings. And I know it feels like a really long road to freedom and a path to self-realization. But let's comfort ourselves by the fact that we're walking it one step at a time together, one day at a time together. So me repeat my deep conviction that without freedom, self-realization is not possible. We each need to be able to make our own choices, to do whatever we wish, until we learn that all our choices and actions affect the whole. So my deep wish for myself, for us, for all life is, may we finally understand that serving the common good is the greatest freedom we possess. I'd like to complete today's exploration by reading a couple of quotes from the Agni Yoga teachings. This is from the book Agni Yoga, sloka number 222. Free will is a subject that is interpreted in many ways. One sees it as willfulness, another as irresponsibility, a third as the madness of the ego. Only the one who has gone through the discipline of spirit can realize how strict the reality of freedom can be. The abuse of freedom is a festival of ignorance. And then the second quote. This is taken from the same book, Agni Yoga. This one is sloka 45. One should firmly tell people that the new world has come into being. People are not prepared to assume their place in the tasks of creation. It is an error to believe that conquest has any connection with the mission of the new world. Whether it is in the conquest of countries or of a special class of people, this belongs with departing ways of thinking. In the process of evolution, one can consider only the ascent of consciousness founded upon freedom of opportunities. So those were the two quotes from the Agni Yoga teachings, which is the yoga of fire, the yoga of synthesis. So thank you for taking this journey together. I'd like to end with a meditation blessing in which we evoke freedom and send out the blessings of freedom. It's very real. It's very needed in the world. And we have the power to bestow these blessings because we have the freedom to choose. So let us just go back inside the group heart and stand in the silent power of the love that lives inside the group heart. And from this place of power, with the sounding of the Tibetan bowl, we will make 3 declarations. And as they are declared, they will wing their way around the world as a blessing. So let's bring our focus into the group heart. And sound the first declaration. May the forces of liberation free our soul from all imprisoning patterns. Let the sound of freedom ring around the world. Let freedom reign on earth for all. So let's take a deep breath together as we stand inside the heart. As we breathe together, we are conspiring, but we're conspiring for the good of the whole. Thank you so much for your presence and your participation today. May we carry the torch of freedom everywhere we go. May we be this light in the world. So good night and blessings from Meditation Mount. Thank you.